Okay, so continuing on with some of the other plotting functionalities we can do within R. Frankly, this is one I leverage quite a bit. Um, Honestly, one reason behind that being Tableau actually here not too long ago made some changes to creating the histograms within Tableau that I don't really care for. So um, I do tend to use R to actually do some of my histograms now, just because I get a little bit more versatility out of it. So, for example, I can just type HIST, and in its most primitive sense, I can just do MT cars, and then of course give it one parameter, and here I get a real basic histogram of my data set. So to further embellish on that a little bit, again, I can also use the main command. And what I don't like about this is, it's, histogram of, and then just simply inserting my data set concatenated with my data element. So I'm going to use the main command to make that a little bit cleaner. Okay, so I'll do histograms of cylinders and run that. So again, a little cleaner in that regard. Now, the other parameter that lives inside of this is the breaks command. So the easiest way to delineate this for you is when we do this in Tableau, if you've ever done histograms in something like Excel, you have to specify your bins, right? So in Tableau and in Excel, you can right click and say, bin size, etc. So in R, you're simply using breaks, okay? So I'm going to force this to 3. Again, don't particularly care for this view, but I can further refine that as well. Okay, so what we've seen thus far is a pretty basic example of a histogram, and also up to this point we haven't done a whole lot with adding additional parameters. So let's change gears and look at a slightly different data set. There's an integrated data set, a different one in R called air passengers. Okay, so if I just run that as is, you can see here I have histogram of air passengers. Okay, and I can look actually at that data in a little more detail. So you can see I've got basically looking at from 1949 to 1960 by month all of the air passengers. Okay, so let's turn that into a little bit more robust histogram. Okay, so I'll start with basic histogram here of air passengers. Okay, so for this one, we're going to specify several parameters. So one thing I like to do when I'm in R and I'm doing that is I like to do a carriage return after each parameter once I get more than a couple, just because it makes it a little bit easier to follow and see each one of those different parameters. So I'm going to say histogram for air passengers. And when you're doing that, also be sure you get that comma at the end of every parameter. Otherwise, unfortunately, R is not really great about telling you where you've messed up. Okay, so my X label, I'm going to label that passengers. Okay, and here we have up to this point we've done nothing with color. Okay, so I've been pretty rigid as far as color that you need to pull into your stuff in Tableau. Of course, Tableau makes it a little bit easier in my opinion, but nonetheless, we can still pull color into our histogram. So I'm going to use the border parameter, and that's just simply going to be the border around each bin, if you will, in my histogram. Okay, so I want my border to be blue, and then I want the actual column in the histogram itself to be green. Okay, and we'll do a little bit more with color here later, and I'll explain some of the finer points of it, but this is a good start. Okay, so next I'm going to specify my X limit here, and So in this case, I'm going to go 100 to 700. If you remember, LAS is my label style. I'm going to set that equal to 1. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group this into 5 bins. Okay, so breaks equals 5. Okay. So I'm going to do a real quick check here, be sure I've got all of my commas in place, I've closed all my quotations out, and let's give this thing a run and see what we get. So, okay, so you can see my histogram for air passengers. So my labels, I've got a title on here now. My columns are actually green, and you can see that really light blue border around the outside of it. Okay, so again, allows us to give a little more granularity into my viz.